All right, thank you, Ellen and marketing team. Glad to be here today. As Ellen pointed out, I have been using Starlink for over 2 years. We're living in satellite communications age at this point, and it's pretty exciting. Those of you who may have picked up a new iPhone 16 or have a 15 or a 14, notice that Apple now has text messaging in the middle of nowhere via satellite. They're using Global Star. You're going to see plans come out from AT&T and Verizon using AST Mobile, I think sometime within the next 12 months, most likely. And T-Mobile teamed up with Starlink and SpaceX to do theirs. So you'll see plans coming out from the individual carriers. But today, if you upgrade to iOS 18, you can already do that. And I actually did it over the weekend. I was driving about 200 miles north in Idaho, where I live. And there's some areas where there's no cell service at all. So it's really nice to have not just the SOS, satellite services we've seen in the past, but to actually be able to send text messages. So great products. And, again, I kind of live the dream here. I use all the products in my personal life as well as at work for AireSpring. So let me see if I can move this forward. There we go. So this is a little bit different than satellite service we've had in the past, meaning that those were geosynchronous satellites. These are LEO, or low Earth orbit satellites, and they're really aimed toward business internet, because as you get closer to, of course, the people that are using it with these dishes, you get low latency, you get high throughput, you get all the things you need that really make it broadband wireless. And that's what's so exciting about it, because in the past, and I have several satellite dishes on my house out here in Star, Idaho. One of those, of course, is Viasat, and we've sold that for many years. Very reliable service. But where I'm at, the latency or the delay on that is north of 300 milliseconds. And as you guys know, for a lot of VoIP products, it wants to be 250 milliseconds or less. So still crystal clear for voice, but you notice a little bit of delay. You don't get that with Starlink. And we have a lot of employees, not just myself. I just did a 4-month trip to meet a lot of you, and customers literally went around the United States in a big loop. But my television, my voice, my Teams conferences, the data for the internet, everything's going through satellite. And I have to say, even in the middle of Yellowstone National Park, where there's not even voice LTE service of any kind for about 50 miles in some areas, it's absolutely flawless to have the Starlink. So what does the network look like? Well, today, Elon Musk and SpaceX have, with Starlink, over 6,000 low Earth orbit mesh satellite units up in space. They're serving over 100 countries, 350 ground stations. We'll show you the map on that later. 360-degree network visibility and control with AireCONTROL. So we're now a global reseller, by the way, for Starlink. For a long time, they didn't have a reseller program. Then they opened it up. Some people joined, in different continents, and a couple of us made it in to sell it internationally. So that's pretty exciting, because as you guys know, we're selling internet now in 190 countries, as well as SD-WAN and security products as well. The upload download speeds, I can confirm this is true. You can typically see, at the worst case, about 40 all the way up to 220 megabits per second of download. That's tremendous. I mean, that is definitely, faster than some people's broadband in their house, particularly when they only have a 100 meg connection. And you can be in the middle of literally nowhere. I've taught entire 4-hour SDX boot camps strictly off Starlink with an SD-WAN box, and having the ability to fail over to our wonderful AT&T and Verizon unlimited plans. Upload, you're going to see 8 to 25 megabits per second, and that low latency, 25 to 60 milliseconds. Keep in mind, voice, which is probably one of the most demanding protocols out there, wants to see a maximum delay or latency of 250 milliseconds. That's 1/4 of a second, because there's 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. And it wants to see less than 1% packet loss. A lot of times on Starlink, you'll see 0%. And then you also want a variance in that latency or delay of about 40 milliseconds. It really delivers, I would say, in the high 90 percentile, no matter where you are in North America. And I've used it all over the United States, works in Canada. And you have global coverage as well. You've got some cruise ships will have like 16 Starlink dishes, and aggregating that bandwidth with SD-WAN and other appliances to provide internet on cruise ships. So that's why internet, if you were curious, been on a cruise in the last couple of years, has improved dramatically. And it's because of these low Earth orbit satellites using ground stations. So typically your dish is communicating with the satellite, and the satellite has inter-satellite links, or ISL. These are basically optical, ISLs, meaning they're using lasers, and they're able to beam at very high speed data, multi-gigabit, between the satellites, so that they can, transfer the data around. So if you're on net, right, you're talking to another Starlink site or whatever, you get there very quickly. Also, if you're trying to communicate with a ground station, or a ground station or a particular satellite has failed, they can relay that data around efficiently in order to get that where it needs to be. And that really unlocks true global connectivity by eliminating the need for fiber connected gateway sites to be located in proximity to the customers. As you'll see, they've got quite a few, about 350, as we noted on the last slide, ground stations, but it's not like they have to be everywhere. They're spread out around the globe, but the way this is built, it's really meant to be self-healing, right? So you have immediate failover. If any node's disrupted, you got instantaneous backup plans. As you guys know, in the Ukraine war, if you were watching the news, the Russians tried to basically mess up the Starlink network because it was being used by the Ukrainian army. And this thing's so robust, it's really hard to disrupt, including in part because of the inter-satellite links, et cetera. You can target a particular satellite, even take out a particular satellite if you're successful at jamming it or killing it. There's 6,000 of its brothers and sisters out there, and they're able to reestablish connectivity. And that's really kind of the joy of getting the high-end dish. You've seen a lot of dishes out there. They're even selling one at Costco now, the Starlink Mini. And it really comes down to the performance of these, meaning that there's a 30-degree or more aperture or range that you're able to pick up satellites from the octal grids. We'll show you kind of what it looks like from space and how the map is divided up. But you're able to really capture more of those satellites, which are built in a very redundant fashion, covering the entire planet, even the North and the South Pole. A little bit more limited coverage there, but there is Starlink there, which is pretty amazing. So it is high speed. With AireCONTROL, we have so many portals now. As you guys know, we have, Fortinet, and they have FortiPortal, FortiManager, FortiAnalyzer. We have our own AirCare portal. We've got, the PepLink portal. Thank God, finally, LTE has portals for customers, not just the carrier, not just the agent. And, then we've got the VeloCloud now, VMware Broadcom has acquired VMware, and so they have the Broadcom SD-WAN. All that's been aggregated into AireCONTROL. So you get the monitoring, you get the views. We tend to steal the best views from all the best software from each one of these vendors and put it in there. And then, if you don't like a particular link, you can say, hey, what are my options for backup? And of course, Starlink and LTE come to mind immediately, but you can look at the bill, you can look at the support cases, you can get lots of options, see where the provisioning is as well. So great portal. We've launched this the last few months. We've got to basically migrate 22,000 customers, but we're getting there. A lot of the new customers are on this already. And so Starlink API integration is already in that portal as well. And again, this is a nice place to see, where is it deployed? How is it performing? What am I paying for it? What support cases in real time? You can actually, if we're troubleshooting with a LEC, you can actually see pings and the trace routes and the technical conversation that's going on, even if you log in at 2 in the morning. We're a 24-hour shop when it comes to those repair and troubleshooting issues. And you can see, that's always the problem with the carrier, wondering, like, what are they doing? When's the last time they did something? What are the next steps? Well, you can see all that. And if you decide that you don't like that link anymore, you've looked it up on your bill because it's all in one interface here, and you're like, you know what, give me some options. They go to you guys as the agents. You give them some options. Hey, Joe, how about twice the bandwidth for half the price? Sounds great. Then when the contract term ends, all that information, you see how, the support tickets have gone. You can look over months of those if you wish, and then make better decisions, right? And Starlink's a huge part of that. When you get those customers to say, hey, time is of the essence. I got to have a circuit end by October 1st. Well, this is the fastest way to get them up, even in the middle of nowhere, even if they got to put it on a generator, they don't have power at the site yet, and get up, right? Simple as that. So I really love the service. I've personally used it in storms, snow, you name it. It's got a heater built in, so if it snows, it'll melt the snow off there. It's pretty rugged. We got hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff happening. It can withstand, almost up to Category 5 with these things. They're pretty robust, and a lot of mounting options. So the network is totally robust, primary, secondary, tertiary, enterprise connectivity. It's really good for business continuity, disaster recovery, particularly when you get an SD-WAN box, because then your IP addresses are going to follow you wherever you take this satellite dish to. And then you've got an alternative to, LTE. LTE does really well in storms, and I'm seeing speeds. I was out in Atlanta recently, and my VP that I hired on my team actually was getting 1 gig up and down, believe it or not, on LTE, and that's on 5G, of course. Haven't seen that before on 4G, but that's extremely reliable as well. We've got great plans with both AT&T and Verizon. And then just for failover connectivity, if you got a customer who's got an MPLS network, they've got SD-WAN, they're heading towards SASE. SASE is very cloud dependent, right? So this whole new security paradigm, the linchpin to that is you got to have connectivity. You got to be on the internet. You got to get to the cloud, right? It doesn't matter if you got 100 POPs worldwide. You got to get to one of them. So Starlink, LTE, fiber, those are my favorite mixes. Instead of going out and getting your customer one big pipe, do what I do in my house. When I came out to Idaho, left San Diego, I built this voice-controlled house. I absolutely don't want to go down. So I have, the Mike Chase formula here. I have 2 fibers, 2 satellites, 2 LTE connections. I've never been down, right? And I've got SD-WAN, of course, and that delivers the IP addresses for my SIP trunks and my hosted phones and all that fun stuff. But also, when you're looking at rural and remote connectivity, we've got employees literally out in Montana. We've got them in Nebraska. We've got them all over the place. I'm here in Idaho. Fortunately, I got 2 fibers. I'm able to get in here at 1 gig or plus speeds. But when you are in the middle of nowhere, and I tend to go there a lot in my RV, I can do my work from anywhere. And hey, why not stare at some bison in Yellowstone National Park or the Grand Tetons? Change up your view. If you can't change up your day, right, you still got to do all your meetings. So emergency remediation is great too. As you guys notice with fiber, there's a lot of aerial fiber out there. The tornado rolls through town. No more aerial fiber, right? I always thought of fiber as being in the ground. So first time I heard aerial fiber, I was like, what? Then they're like, oh yeah, we're stringing it from telephone pole to telephone pole. Well, not always the best idea, but sometimes it's the only idea you got. You can't always get it in the ground or cut across something. So that's how that's been working. But it really is great in those situations. So let's talk about the kit. What comes in the kit? Well, you get the dish, you get a wedge mount. So this kind of goes to the back of this, and then it can sit on a flat surface. You get a power supply, you get a mount for that as well. A Starlink cable that basically goes between the dish and the power supply. You get an Ethernet cable. They used to sell these on the website for $25, but when you're talking business class stuff, you just want to have an Ethernet cable, so it's included. And then you have the power cable. Traditionally, when you bought Starlink retail, the power supply was built into a modem that was doing Wi-Fi, originally Wi-Fi 5, now Wi-Fi 6. But for the business customers, professional installation means you are going to be drilling a small hole in the side of the building, professional grade installation, putting this Ethernet cable through there, and then connecting directly in, hopefully to your SD-WAN box or whatever your network infrastructure looks like. But that's what comes in the high performance kit. Now, the difference between the high performance kit and the enterprise kit is about, like I said, at 30 degrees, where you see more satellites. When you boot these devices up, what happens, they have a motor as well as that heater, if it's snowing, but it'll basically go flat. It'll face the sky totally flat like a table, okay, and it'll sit there for about a minute, and it'll receive, beams are bouncing off from all directions. It'll figure out where the strongest satellite signal is, and then it will tilt at some degree of angle and rotate. It can go 360 degrees around. It'll figure out and lock on to the best satellite, and it'll constantly be doing that, where it won't go flat again, but it'll make adjustments as it sees new satellites that are coming on and off the octal grid, and it will lock onto them. And it's a great unit. So the high performance is kind of the way to go. For a little bit less cost kit-wise, you can get the enterprise, but it's about a 30-degree difference. So the difference in about 140 degrees versus 110 degrees in the satellite dish. So you'll pick up fewer satellites, but it's still pretty robust. However, if you're looking for, you don't want to go, sometimes you'll go off grid maybe a second or two, maybe a little bit longer. If you don't want that happening, get the high performance kit. If you're really going to rely on this thing, it's not just a backup, for example, I would go with the high performance kit. If you're looking for something that's high speed and you're not getting high speed LTE, you're not, lucky like my buddy Steve out in Atlanta who was getting 1 gig up and down, then, an enterprise kit would be fine, right? Because you're likely to get 100, 200 megs out of that, and that'll get you by. I mean, especially with your voice calls and conferences and everything else. So this is what comes in this kit. And then a couple of specs here between the two, as I was mentioning. Let's see here. You get the enterprise cable. So that's 164 feet. That's pretty good. Of course, it's Ethernet, so you can extend it a total of 328 feet if you need to. So there's some options there. Now, keep in mind, People always ask about public IP assignments. You are getting DHCP, you're getting dynamic IPs, that's fine. If you want static IPs, put an SD-WAN box in. They're cheap anyway. I mean, I got one in my house. They're awesome. And then you get some IP addresses with many static IPs as you want. You get one for free with SD-WAN, which is great. So that's a good reason to do it. And you can put that on your firewall, your SIP trunks, or whatever. But if you want more static IPs, you can get them from us. But put that SD-WAN box in. The SD-WAN box and Starlink love to be married. These things are great together. And then which one's right for you? Well, as I was mentioning earlier, at the 140 versus the 110 degrees. If you're using it primarily as backup and cost is a factor, you can go with the Enterprise. But if you're really going to rely on this antenna, you're going to be out in the middle of Nebraska, Montana, whatever, that's your primary connectivity, or you're going to fail over to it a fair amount of the time, I really do recommend the flat high performance antenna. It does really, really well. I've got one of those and it performs. It really does in a lot of nasty conditions. Whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, typically this stays online. You have to get really, really, really heavy rain, big droplets coming down, cats and dogs, to have any kind of intermittent connectivity, and that's always been the case with satellite, right? But it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, we've been using satellite TV for years, so most of us know, how it reacts to weather. This is no different. In fact, this is more robust than your television that you're getting right now. In fact, I moved all of my stuff over, Sling TV, Wi-Fi calling, with my carrier on my cell phone. All that stuff goes through my Starlink when I'm in the middle of nowhere, and it's flawless. I absolutely love this product. Now that said, you can install it yourself. I mean, you do get with many of these kits, you get the tripod. You can just put it out there. I think when I was doing this 2 years ago, they gave me a 75-foot cable. You get a 164-foot one in this case. You can put it on a tripod. You can put it on a mount on a building. You can go buy your own tripod stuff. There's a lot of stuff being sold on Amazon. If you have an RV, you might try flagpolebuddy.com, which is a company out of San Diego where I used to live. But there's a lot of mounts out there for it. We'll show you a couple here in a minute. But you don't have to worry about, gee, how do I get this set up, etc. Ultimately, we'll come out, we'll install it, and the tech will hand off that Ethernet cable. And of course, every network engineer on Earth knows what to do with an Ethernet cable. Plug it in your network and let's go. Plug it into that SD-WAN, hopefully, and off you will go. Now, as great as Starlink is, we're covering all the things that are not great about Starlink, meaning their support. It's kind of like these other big companies that Elon has had, PayPal and others. It's impossible to get a hold of a human, right? Or what do you do if one of the, I think, more common complaints is sometimes you get a kit where there's some part in there, the dish doesn't work, or it conks out after 48 hours, whatever. It's rare, but it happens, and then you're kind of left holding the bag. Well, not when you go with us, right? And we've got a lot of people out there who I heard a story where an IT guy the other day, I guess, had $70,000 a month of these things because he had to keep buying them retail for the company, and then he'd have to reimburse it. He must really love his company and hope that he gets reimbursed every month, because if he got stiffed with that bill, it'd be tremendous. But there's a lot of IT guys out there, or somebody at corporate, who's had to deal with just putting it on a credit card every month, versus more traditional billing and other methods. And keep in mind these days with our bills, because we're doing a lot of international, we're handling, I think Joseph said the other day, about 17 different currencies. So it gives you a lot of options, plus that support, plus that replacement when you're on the OpEx model. You, like everything else, you can buy the kits if you want to, but then you have to replace at least that aspect of it, and we'll just manage it for you. But the management overhead is pretty inexpensive, and so we've had a lot of customers opting to do that. So customer self-install is an option, but I highly recommend that we do the Starlink on-site professional installation, and we'll also do an on-site survey. You got to have a clear view of the sky. You don't want trees blocking the way, buildings blocking the way. You've got to figure out where that thing's going to get mounted, where it's going to go, maybe on a tripod, whatnot, and make sure you got a clear view of the sky. You do have, we'll show you this in the app, an obstruction kind of dialog there, which shows you what the satellite is seeing if you point your phone kind of in the same tilt and direction and kind of look around. But definitely want to get that professionally installed so that your customer has the best experience possible. And these are the mounts. I actually use the pipe adapter because I'm kind of going between a pole that mounts to the back of my travel trailer RV, and then I'll put it also into kind of like those umbrellas you have in your patio, where it's got a 2-inch pole and it goes into an 80-pound base. But instead of an umbrella nerd that I am, I have the satellite dish. So I can take it from home and then take it to the RV with ease.
But if you know you're going to be at a particular location, then, okay, wall mount it, pivot mount it, mobility mount it. That's kind of the wedge one that you're seeing over there. Although for mobility mount, there's also a lot of options online where they have magnetic mounts for cars and that sort of thing. So kind of interesting. But a lot of mounts there, and that's another good reason to get things professionally done, because you're going to get the right mount and not waste your time ordering a bunch of stuff you don't need and then having to return it. This is the app. I would say it, from my experience, you're usually up and running no more than 10 minutes, usually 5 minutes. It's really quick. The dish will come up, sit there for about a minute flat, and then it will lock onto a satellite endpoint itself. No more satellite pointing, no more, oh, gee, am I facing, south or west or whatever. I mean, it just does its thing. You really just need a clear view of the sky. Obviously, in an RV, one thing I would say is, normally you're trying to park under the tree because you want the shade. So a lot of times you'll be using the tripod to move it a little bit out from under there to get a clear view of the sky. But once you do that, at least for me, I got my television, I got my phones, I got my internet data for meetings, etc. So you really just have to plug it into power, and it kind of does its thing once you get all the cables connected. You can also buy a lot of carrying cases online, Amazon and other places. That makes it nice when you're traveling with it. But typically it's going to go in your building for enterprise and for business. It's not going to be moving around. As part of the install or just using the app, we look at this tool right here, which kind of says, do you have any obstructions? If you're under a tree, it's going to probably look like this. So you got to get out from under that, have a clear view of the sky, so you can have beams, while the dish is laying flat, aimed at the sky, kind of like a flat table. It's going to get beams, skipping across it from all directions and figure out which one has the best signal. Once you get that, you're going to see some pretty astounding speed. Like I said, up to 240 megabits per second. So what are the data plans? And just so you guys know, we don't, mark up the data plans. Customers won't go to the website and see a higher price for a data plan than they're going to get from you guys. All right. So same data plans, same price on the data plan. These are the speeds that you can expect. And the priority data, it's unlimited data, but what happens is if you want the highest speed, let's say you're getting 175 megabits per second, you might drop down to closer to 100 or 90 if you run out of your priority data. So if you're doing something that's really important, you might want to get, 6 terabyte, 2 terabyte. Your average house, just as a rule of thumb, is using about 1 terabyte. If you guys have looked at the cable providers and everybody else out there in small print, they started to say if you go over 1 terabyte a month, then you're going to pay, right, extra. But most people, even me, who's a maniac, I got like 200 devices on my network. My house is voice controlled, and it's like tech mecca over here. I don't go over 1 terabyte. So 1 terabyte should be pretty good, but you do get those power user customers who are moving large files every day. That was the case when I worked at Broadcom. We were moving entire chip designs to Taiwan, and they were like, 10 gigs a piece or 100 gigs. It was pretty insane. You might need the priority data. So you've got some choices there. So when you sign up for this, what does it look like? What's the service delivery process when you finally get somebody interested and say, yep, and they sign the paper? Well, we're going to do a discovery, right, with our channel managers and account managers. Solutions engineering, which is my team, will gather some of the spec. What are the applications you're running? What kind of speeds do you need? What kind of latency? And then we'll come up with a proposal, a solution, and a contract review. Once that gets signed, it goes to service delivery, where we place the orders with Starlink. We've got kits in stock, by the way, so the shipping's pretty quick on these things. I think we bought like 100 of them at least. And so we'll ship that out, schedule the installation and service activation. So the dish will get mounted, it'll get installed, it'll get tested. They'll make sure there's no obstructions. It's getting its premium, view of the sky. And then we'll activate the service and essentially test the speeds and all that, and you're off to go. From that point forward, it's just service assurance and paying the bill and so forth, and aggregating those bills. So one of the questions we get a lot is, if you got a customer who already has Starlink, but they're tired of not getting support from Starlink, they're tired of putting it on their credit card every month, they'd rather have the company get billed for it, etc. Well, yeah, we can move all those customers over from wherever the world they may have service, whether it's in Asia, Europe, United States, North America, whatever. There will be an interruption of service. They'll have to disconnect with Starlink under their current plan, and it'll probably take a day or two to move them over to us and then get them spun up. They may even want to upgrade their kit. So if they initially went down to Costco and got the mini, or they bought the enterprise kit and they want to go high performance, they can do that. And if it's on the OpEx model, we're going to take care of the replacement and everything else. and support it, troubleshoot it, etc. And I highly recommend you guys get an SD-WAN box. That helps quite a bit. Meanwhile, they'll get, the advantage of the air control advantage, right? Meaning that air control, air deploy, air support, air monitor, air alert, air automate are there to, give them the visibility they want 24/7 into the service. And when they see an issue, then it's as easy as emailing or calling, but email tt@airspring.com and we're on it 24 hours a day. If the dish turns out that it's bad, or the modem or the power supply or whatever, we replace it under the OpEx model. So that's kind of a really nice thing to have. And you can look at the trouble tickets and see the conversations that we're having, with Starlink or whoever it is. Maybe it's some other box. If you bought our firewall or SD-WAN, all that's going to be covered when you get it from us. So it makes it turnkey and allows you to jump into the satellite communications age with ease, right? We also give you the tier 3 engineer. We call them the AirPods, right? And basically, those are engineers that actually know your customer, know their layout. So, as you're spinning the service up, we've got customers that are putting 50, 60, 70, 100 of these things out, sometimes in different countries. They've got a team that's familiar to them that's going to not only troubleshoot this when they call in, but, be there for the deployment and all the technical questions, et cetera. And we've got a lot of expertise in this because we have quite a few employees who are using Starlink. It's a great product. But again, if you're not a global reseller with your own private line into Starlink, good luck calling them up or getting them through the web. It takes weeks and weeks to get a single issue resolved or get something looked at, or find out simple things like what's on the roadmap, what are some of the newer licenses that are available. What if I, want to do mobile or other applications with it? What are my options? What if I need to move it, to a different country, or move a customer who already has it over to this service? We got people to answer all those questions for you. So what's our superpowers? Well, as with all our products, integrated to our super portal, which is AireCONTROL. We have like 15, 16 different portals. Even I was getting confused, right? So now it all puts it together, your billing, your provisioning, your support cases, your monitoring, all into one portal, making it easy. We live in an API world. It's not about, SNMP and syslog and pinging devices on the internet to see if they're there. If you're not tied, we have like 15 coders on staff, programmers, right? If you don't have those people to tie into the APIs of these very powerful multi-million-dollar platforms, then you really don't see much. That's why you used to call up the carrier and they didn't know what was going on with your network and you just had a blip. You don't get that with the APIs. You get real-time info. If anything blinks, anything happens, we know about it. So you get those tier 3 engineers. We got a lot of certified people on staff these days. A lot of training going on with all these different vendors, how to troubleshoot satellite, how to troubleshoot LTE, how to troubleshoot SD-WAN. It's not easy, but we got that deep bench. So you get professional installation. That's always a plus. I mean, who wants to fall off a ladder, go on a roof, especially we're getting toward winter and there's going to be storms. I don't want to be on the roof, period, right? But especially don't want to be up there in storms. So get the professional install. These guys know what they're doing. They got the right gear. They got the right boots. They're not going to fall off your roof, right? We have those NOC engineers who open tickets directly with Starlink. We have good support from them. But I would say, having been a retail customer for 2 years, if you got an issue and you don't have AireSpring in the middle dealing with it as the glue to hold this whole thing together, good luck. You're just, it's a great service when it works, and when it doesn't, then you get frustrated. That's where we step in. So the little amount that we charge per month to manage these is well worth it. And that's why we got a lot of people moving over right now. AireSpring maintains a complete inventory of these things. So, if we find out that, hey, we got to RMA it and you're on the OpEx model, boom, we can ship you another unit. And we can do that even next day where available. Obviously it's dependent on what the shipping company's capabilities are, but we're not going to be the slow pokes. Now, this is a great thing. If you got your computer in front of you, you could go check this out right now, particularly if you got a couple of monitors. But satellite map.space, it will actually show you in real time all 6,000 satellites, and you can move around the planet. And as you can see, there's those octal grids I was referring to. When you're zoomed out, those red dots are where the ground stations are. The one that's out here in Idaho is in Colburn, Idaho, which is north of me. I think some other ones are actually closer. They're south or east of me. But bottom line, you can see all that in real time. And that kind of reinforces what I'm saying about SD-WAN, where you'll notice Some of these octal grids don't have a satellite in them. So that's where the high performance kit comes in handy, where that extra 30-degree aperture is picking up satellites that are just beyond your octal section of the grid, and therefore you're more likely to stay up. Otherwise, if you're paired, let's say an enterprise dish and it drops for a few seconds, you'll fail over if you have SD-WAN to like LTE or something else, and then back again. And that's what I did on my 4-month RV trip coming to see all of you. And thank you for all the sales you do for AireSpring. You guys complete us. But the bottom line is that's what I did, so that as I'm teaching 4-hour classes, I never went down. But check out this website. It's cool to show customers too. Once you get done looking at this, you'll understand why everybody's complaining that Elon's got a monopoly on satellite communications. This is another good one too, because if you're wondering, how long, at what speed and how long would 6 terabytes or 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte on those plans or 40 gigs or whatever last, you can put it in here, right? So if you were looking at like a 1 terabyte plan, you just click gigabits here, put 1,000 in there, because 1,000 gigs is 1 terabyte, right? Or 6,000 if you're looking at the 6 terabyte plan. And then you can say, okay, at what bandwidth, which we typically think of it in megabits or gigabits, but usually megabits per second. If I'm burning it through at whatever, 220 megabits per second, how long before I go through, in this case, 100 meg of data? Right? Well, 3.81 seconds. So, all right, so we'll open it up to questions. What questions have we got? Anybody want to read them off to me, or let me just access the thing here? Okay. Let's see. A couple of questions. We've deployed a couple of Starlink circuits. This one's from Adam. We've deployed a couple of Starlink circuits and we're able to get an IP address from Starlink. Yes, you will. It's delivered via DHCP. I don't think I've seen them do any statics, but we will hand out statics through SD-WAN. And that's actually preferable because you never want to get static IPs from your circuit provider or your broadband provider, whether it's wireless or not, because it's going to stay with them, right? It's much easier to move between locations, move to a colo, move to a cloud, move out of a colo or out of a cloud when you have SD-WAN either as a physical or virtual appliance, and those IP addresses follow it wherever it comes online. I've had people move from Florida to Brazil. I've had them move to the cloud, make it a virtual appliance, same config. But when you can haul your public IPs with you, as well as your private IPs, life's very easy. So we do that quite a bit. Who installs this? Zachary asks. We do. I mean, you can do a self-install. I don't recommend it. Get the professional guy out there who can, drill the hole into the building, make sure you're not ruining your wall or your building, but get that Ethernet cable the inside of the building, because the satellite is waterproof, weatherproof. It's going to sit outside, and get that mounted properly, good view of the sky, etc. You don't want to do it yourself because you don't want to be drilling a bunch of holes because you had to move it around 3 or 4 times. You want to get it right the first time. So definitely go with a professional install. Another question from Iggy. Thank you, Iggy. Would you bond 5G for backup, active and passive, or even active-active to improve speeds? Wondering as a standalone Starlink coverage for sufficient coverage with a building full of people. You can, but again, that's where you're going to want, the Starlink itself doesn't have any bonding capability, so you're going to want to put an SD-WAN box in, and then from there, you can plug in as many Starlinks or LTEs as you want. I used to call that my swamp package. As long as you had power, even from a generator, you can get all the internet you want. And in those instances, you'll see us on the Peplink coming out with a product called Speed Fusion soon, which is their proprietary SD-WAN just to bond a bunch of LTE together, because AT&T and a lot of carriers kind of gave up on power bonding. They talked about it. Ultimately, for whatever reason, didn't do it, decided not to do it. Couldn't do it. I don't know what the issue was, but it's not happening. So you want to bond. And Starlink, by the way, does have kind of a partnership with Peplink, who's their other vendor. So we've got 2 vendors playing nice already. You can bond all these links together, your LTE, your Starlink, all of that, with either the Peplink product in Speed Fusion, or just put an SD-WAN box in. And then you can use combinations of all your bandwidth, and the failover and all that worked very, very well. I've done it. Teaching classes exactly like this, where the satellite went a little outside the octal grid, and basically it failed over to LTE for like 20 seconds or whatever it was, 5 seconds, and then back again. And of course, with SD-WAN, I'm not taking a hit. Which falls right into Robert's question: can we use Peplink for SD-WAN for Starlink? Absolutely. They got a huge partnership. I actually have a slide on that if you guys have been to the SDX formerly the SD-WAN bootcamp, but now it covers SASE and SD branch because we're doing switches and Wi-Fi APs from Fortinet as well now. But yeah, absolutely. They've got a huge partnership. We're part of that with Peplink and Starlink with the SpeedFusion Connect product, which will be SpeedFusion Hub for us because we're going to put it up in the cloud and aggregate it up there. And that's what NASCAR and offshore yacht racing, a lot of guys are doing. Pricing, Dan asked, you can get that from your channel manager, so I'll defer on that one. What experience do you have with schools around the world, not just North America? Well, we do all kinds of customers. AireSpring has 22,000 customers around the world. These products, if you need internet, if you want to do Wi-Fi calling, if you want to get television or whatever in the middle of nowhere via internet, then this is the dish for you, right? And it works for all applications. We got schools, we got banks, we got healthcare, we got global manufacturers. So talk to your channel manager. Also go see agentstar.net. Check us out on LinkedIn. We've got a lot of use cases for different stuff. So if you're looking for a particular use case, contact our marketing department, your channel manager, they'll get it for you. Question from Michael Bell. Any idea how long before service is available in India? Understand government of India has not approved Starlink yet. Good question. Send that through your channel manager. I don't know the specific regulatory right now in India, but we do have a lot of connectivity in India. You don't necessarily have to have Starlink. You might be able to jump on one of our roughly 100 plus POPs around the world. We've got a 23 site GPN global private network. We have another 100 plus POPs with Cato. And when we're selling Cato, not as SASE, just raw connectivity. We just did one last week from Johannesburg, South Africa to London in the UK, and it was extremely inexpensive. I was a little shocked. So definitely ask about those options, but I know we have coverage in multiple parts of India. Kristen asked, what are the average monthly management costs? I think it's around $100 a month, but you'd have to ask your channel manager. It's pretty minimal, and that's why people are in math coming to AireSpring because they're really tired of dealing. They love the product. A lot of people are Elon fans too, right? But at the end of the day, they're just like, you know what? I'm really tired of dealing with the lack of support. When things break, it takes 3 weeks to get something fixed. Done with that. So come to AireSpring. We deal with all that. It's seamless. Same reason a lot of people use us to going direct to AT&T, right? We love them too. Jeff asked, how do we get the equipment and plan cost and financial model for partners? Well, you're going to get that from your channel manager. They've got the rate sheet, and you guys get to decide what your commission is and all that. So get those rate sheets, talk to your channel manager today. If you don't know who that is, just email us. We'll figure out who it is for you, look it up, etc. Are there any solar plus Starlink bundles that you know of for remote clients? If you go on YouTube and watch some videos, there's a lot of guys out there because, feeding it DC power or whatever. Out there, and I've seen some use cases with that, probably with the mini versus some of the bigger dishes, like the high performance one, etc. But there's definitely people out there you can connect with. It's got a huge community of fans that love Starlink, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it, mounting it to vehicles. I think the guy who runs our data centers, Darren, told me he put one of those dishes on his Jeep, so he wired it to the vehicle somehow. But there's a lot of videos on YouTube you can check out, Thomas. So definitely take a look at that. It's nothing that we're doing specifically, but yeah, it is highly modifiable, and I think that's one of the great characteristics of a lot of this stuff. Clinton asked, in lightning prone areas, what's the option for proper grounding of the device from lightning damage? Great question, Clinton. There are lightning arresters that we can either provide you or you can purchase. They sell them even on Amazon, but those are great to have, and I do recommend those because anything that's sticking out from a building eventually gets hit by lightning, and you don't want that starting your building on fire or any of the bushes nearby or anything else. So there are lightning arresters because it is an Ethernet cable. And I would say this to you guys, for any product that you're putting out on a roof, whether it's wireless or whether it's got an Ethernet connection, there are lightning arresters for all that stuff. I used to have a Wi-Fi antenna at my old house in California, and I had a lightning arrestor on it. Fortunately, it never got hit by lightning, but it did find a 50-pound owl one night, which was pretty interesting. All right, let's see, we got a couple more questions in here. Let's see here. LTE, 5G, AT&T, Verizon. Does AireSpring have T-Mobile as well? T-Mobile has started reaching out to you agents directly, but they haven't actually come up with a program or cutting deals directly with us, carriers and super carriers, as of yet. Obviously, they're owned by Deutsche Telekom, so I'm hoping they open up a program soon. Not everybody has an AT&T Apex program, unfortunately. But as soon as they do, you can rest assured we'll be the first ones to dive in. So if you do see that, And in fact, bug them about it, right? Because they're going out and bugging you guys, hey, sign up, and trying to kind of put a semi-channel spin on it and say, hey, listen, I would love it if you guys would talk to, our upstream providers like AireSpring and get them signed up, because it really would open it up to the market. So I agree with you, Robert. That'd be great. But as of today, nope. We got Verizon, we got AT&T, we got pooled plans, we have unlimited plans now with both carriers. So that's been giving us pretty good coverage so far. Question from Alma: does your team have experience with obtaining ROEs or access to the roof for cases where the customer does not own the building? We do, and we deal with that a lot, but ultimately it is the customer who's in that lease or whatever with the building owner in order to do that. Sometimes with a lot of dishes too, and you saw this with television, there's federal laws that kind of mandate they have to allow a certain amount of access. So usually that's not an issue, but we've got a legal and regulatory team that can field those questions through your channel manager. So definitely ask if you've got a particular location in mind. Brian asked, tell me more about your SD-WAN with movable static IPs. In short, with every SD-WAN box, which is really just a next generation router. So, I grew up with Cisco routers and switches and all that. And when I got my CCIE and I was working for Broadcom. But at the end of the day, it's really just the next generation router. The difference is you can now plug all the bandwidth you want, whether it's copper, fiber, whatever, and it makes all the decisions. It makes all the adjustments. You really don't have to, it's totally brainless. You don't have to be a network guru anymore, which sucks because I had to read 15,000 pages to get certified just for that one. I got 32 other certs. But the reality is it's just the next generation router. We deliver static IPs out of our data centers worldwide. One of the few carriers. Every carrier does this with SD-WAN. Now, we were one of the first ones to do it. Big Leaf, I think was the very first one to ever do it on their solution. But we do it, and then everybody else copied. And we do it worldwide, though. That's the huge difference with us. A lot of people can only do it in North America. We can do it in Asia. We can do it in Europe. And those IPs are critical to your internet experience, because the minute you change your IP, every legacy firewall on Earth, we can always argue about which firewall is best, will drop your traffic. So those are important. And from what I've seen, you're not going to get those from Starlink. You're going to get an IP address from, via DHCP, which will change once in a while, was at least my experience. But if you want those movable static IPs, you can move them virtually, or just it'll follow the box around. But if you ever, let's say the box was destroyed, we could take all your IPs and put them on another box, in another country, another state, another city, next city over, and all your resources would be back online if they were pointing to those static IPs, right? So good question. I think, let's see, no, we still got more. This is good. You guys are asking lots of questions. All right, let's see here. Let me go down a little bit. If a customer wants to move their Starlink service to AireSpring, does it need to be activated for a certain amount of time before it can be moved over to AireSpring? No, obviously you may have, I don't think there's any contractual stuff directly to Starlink. It depends on the service, but obviously you got to honor your contract, right? But typically you just disconnect it. I don't think it really matters how long it's been connected. You disconnect it with them. You then give us all the information, serial number, all that. We get you hooked up on our service and reactivate it. And then, of course, at that time, if you want to get a new kit and put it on OpEx, then you don't have to worry about hardware. If you're bringing it to us and keeping the hardware and it dies, then you might want to opt for our hardware at that point. Otherwise, you'll have to kind of wait for the normal, several week replacement, which is no fun. So I think that's what's so cool about them offering. Let's see here. What else we got? Brad asks, is there any reason to go with traditional satellite over Starlink? Not really these days, to be honest, but I guess it depends. I would still say that Viasat is probably still one of the largest satellite providers out there, but it's a whole different service. And it really depends on what you're doing. For what we do a lot, where it's voice communications and it's, low latency and high bandwidth is really a priority, then, Starlink is going to really perform. I still see a lot of gas stations using Viasat. If you're processing credit cards or point of sale stuff, a satellite's a satellite. So then it just comes down to pricing and availability. All right, next question from Frank. Can we take one cable and split two Starlink antenna? No, they're dedicated, right? Because it's a broadband. It really is like a circuit. So you're just going to have one cable and one Starlink antenna. You're not going to double the bandwidth by splitting the cable and putting two antennas on it. But nice try. Definitely a guy who used to do this in his television days. I love it. I remember a lot of people splitting the cable, doing that with the TV there. Could I install this in a rural trailer park and attach APs and sell Wi-Fi to 15 or 20 different mobile homes? Yes, you could. That's pretty easy to do. In that case, of course, you can put up the APs and you got that Ethernet cable coming in. That's pretty easy to do. So I actually think a lot of RV parks should be using this, because I got to tell you, if I didn't have Starlink and I would jump on, I had the Winegard unit on the RV and would hop on the park's Wi-Fi. It was terrible. For what they charge you these days, everything's expensive, right? But you would think the internet at these RV parks, you have a lot of young professionals, um, older guys like me, I'm turning 55 this year. But, the reality is, you think there'd be, there's a lot of business people traveling around for business. And it's like, you think that they would actually have good connectivity. No, it's horrible. Even at KOA, some of the biggest national brands, it's horrible. So please, Tim, reach out to me. I would love to, help you with that project, because gosh, it's terrible out there. If you don't have your own Starlink dish, you're just, people look at you like you're a beggar. I mean, it's really bad if you're on the park Wi-Fi. Oh my God. Next question from Brian. We installed, let's see here, let me expand this a little bit. We installed a Starlink once for a client in a big building with 35-foot ceilings, dish on the roof. Because of the cable length, the power supply is up in the ceiling, powered by an extension cord down to the floor. Yeah, see, this is why you want the professional install. But he continued, the Starlink router ended up in the meditation room because of the limited cable length, etc. Well, it's an Ethernet cable, so the limitation really in a professional installation isn't going to be the 164 feet that they gave you. Now, if you did this earlier, you probably had the 75-foot cable, which is probably why it's up in the roof. Business class stuff, they know to give you 164 feet, but you can extend that Ethernet cable, RJ45 adapter, and go up to 328 feet total, right? So it's regular Ethernet at that point. So you got options. But again, you're making my point, my friend, as to why you should do a professional installation. Otherwise, yeah, it gets pretty hinky once in a while. My email, by the way, if anybody's curious, has questions that I didn't get to, mike.chase, CHASE, at AireSpring.com, AIRE, spring.com.